In the beginning, women in truth were the sun. We were authentic human beings. Today, women are the moon. We live as dependents and simply reflect the light that emanates from another source. Our faces are pale blue, like the moon, like the sick.
This quote comes from Hiratsuka Raicho, a writer and pioneering feminist in Japan who founded Japan's first all-women literary magazine, Saito, in 1911. It is also the opening line of the book, Reflections on the Way to the Gallows, Rebel Women in Prewar Japan, which is a collection of memoirs and essays from notable Japanese female figures and revolutionaries, including socialists, anarchists, nihilists, and more, all from the years prior to World War II, the years leading up to Japan's horrific crimes against humanity, fueled by ultranationalism, totalitarianism, and the rise of fascism. It beautifully and eloquently shares the overwhelming amount of obstacles that women faced, along with the bottled frustrations of the women who wanted positive change to happen and for people to be treated kindly and equally. This collection, compiled and introduced by Mikiso Hane, a Japanese-American professor of history at Knox College, elaborates on this quote by Hiratsuka Raicho by saying,
"Indeed, it appears that women at the dawn of Japanese history were the sun. The sun goddess, Amaterasu, was the founding deity of Japan and the ancestor of the imperial family. And yet, Japan became a staunchly patriarchal society, with men compelling women to be subservient, submissive, self-effacing, and humble. Centuries of feudal rule by the warrior class had fixed the place of women in the society and in the family into a rigid mold."
This collection has been revolutionary for me, and for so many others. I have only visited Japan once in my life, and I remain relatively new to Japan's extensive history and traditions. But I find that along with my own ignorance, many people have never heard of the women in this book, which is a travesty. The women discussed in the book are inspirational, and I find myself in awe that despite their circumstances, they chose to fight for a better world and a cause they could get behind. Yet I can't help but question why the harm they fought against continues on even decades after their time. In nearly 100 years, their sentiments still resonate so deeply and touch upon our society today, especially with an increasing amount of misogyny and the shift towards fascism all across the world, so it can feel as if their efforts were in vain. They tried to fight a system that undermined them at every turn. A system built upon abuse. For those unfamiliar, abuse has many forms present throughout society, but the one concerning me today is systemic abuse, which can be defined as the process by which an individual or group is dealt with unfairly by a social or cultural system or authority. These social or cultural systems have been built to abuse you as the victim, while also making you feel powerless to fight against it. Its power is in isolation, as this structure of abuse relies on your feelings of separation from your own communities. For if you don't conform to its abusive tendencies, you'll be cast out of society. It's as Fukuda Hideko, a feminist activist who tried to arm Korea with weapons and incite a revolution against the Japanese government in 1885, as well as the creator of the magazine Sekai Fujin, Women of the World, which sought to empower women, writes in her story,
"Even though I was a woman, I decided to risk my life challenging the brutal government. And now I was learning the truth of the adage, if you win, you are a loyalist. If you lose, you are a traitor."
This structure that abuses and isolates those fighting for equality and independence is one that has been fought for thousands of years, and we still continue to fight it. Nowadays, however, it seems that this systemic abuse based on the ideas of racism, misogyny, bigotry, and more are not only being celebrated more often, especially in online circles, it feels like this abuse is being baked into the laws that govern society, as if governments want to set us back decades in any progress that we've made. Don't get me wrong, We have grown so much as a society from the years since the early 1900s. Yet with every step forward, we take a step back. Honestly, it's feeling like a lot of steps back these days. The biggest example I can give is of Sanae Takaichi, Japan's first ever female prime minister, elected just this year. Now that is an amazing feat, especially in such a conservative and misogynistic culture that Japan has held for so long. I also love that she said she would prioritize equality of opportunity above all else, and will have much more qualified women in her cabinet than her predecessors. But at the same time, she is being described as ultra-conservative. In regards to social views, she says she supports the imperial family's male-only succession, meaning that the emperor can only be a man. She opposes same-sex marriage, which is a common conservative view for Japanese citizens. And she opposes amending the 19th century law that requires married couples to have the same surname. She wants women to take the last name of their husbands, a practice often seen as treating women similar to property, all to uphold traditional family values. Any woman or child that does not share the same surname as the man of the family will be virtually invisible to the state, ignored, and isolated. They need to conform to this naming convention to even be recognized as real individuals. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on Japanese politics, or to know if her time as prime minister will affect the landscape of Japan. I'm always hoping for the best, but I do know that these particular views perpetuate a structure built upon abuse, one that has been going on for thousands of years, all over the world, that affect millions of people. With this systemic abuse, and being constantly disappointed by the people and the views continuing to perpetuate it, I often turn to the writings of such impactful and revolutionary women. How I relish in movements of equality and passionate people for the cause. With every word they write, however, I can't help but wonder if there's any escape to this. How could anyone escape systemic abuse? I have been contemplating this question ever since I released my initial video about the lessons of abuse found in the games Silent Hill 2 and Mouthwashing. And now, it's brought me again to a new game in the series I now intertwine with the numerous representations of abuse. Silent Hill F. Surprisingly, Silent Hill F not only highlights important aspects of abuse and the victims, it also provides me a glimpse of an answer to how we can escape systemic abuse. So I want to spend this time to understand the messaging and context of the game in relation to how we can move forward. So if you're ready, let's begin. Developed by Neobards Entertainment and published by Konami, Silent Hill F is the latest entry in the Silent Hill series. The series known for the horrific imagery of a town covered in fog and plagued by supernatural monsters and events. Yet somehow, there's a special allure to this town of Silent Hill, since many characters are seemingly drawn to it, stumbling in to become tormented by the psychological horrors and mysteries that unfold, mostly caused by their own psychological trauma. It serves as their own personal hell. Silent Hill F, on the other hand, is distinctly different in its approach to the town of Silent Hill. Besides not being set in America, and rather being set in 1960s Japan, Silent Hill F shows the journey of young Hinako Shimizu, who isn't drawn to the town of Silent Hill. In fact, she is located in Ebisugaoka, her hometown, for the majority of the game. Ebisugaoka loosely translates to the Hill of Ebisu, the god of wealth and prosperity, who supports tradesmen and fishermen, who, according to legend, is also deaf. So in a sense, Ebisugaoka is Silent Hill, just not the same Silent Hill we've come to know. And Hinako has always been there. This is an important distinction and message we need to understand when discussing systemic abuse. Hinako didn't wander into a system that abuses her. She didn't ask for the town of Silent Hill, but she had grown up in the system where Silent Hill and the systemic abuse of 1960s Japan was thrust upon her without her consent. This is highlighted as Hinako's hometown is consumed by the same fog that plagued Silent Hill, along with the sprouting of numerous red spider lilies, all of which Hinako attempts to run away from during the numerous chase sequences of the game. It's easy to see the symbolism portrayed in these sequences. In fact, the entirety of the game is filled to the brim with overt depictions of how the policies surrounding women abuse them in the name of honoring culture. From the representations of the monsters to Hinako's journal entries, we see the world, messaging, and critique that Silent Hill F wants the world to hear. By all means, Silent Hill F is anything but silent. It's loud, deafening. It screeches to its audience on the horrors of this systemic abuse, attempting to rattle the cage and awake society into realizing just how bad this system is. But just like Abisu, our society is deaf, unwilling to hear the pains of a teenage girl, ultimately dismissing them to perpetuate an imbalanced system of power. It's moments like this that remind me of how isolationary this systemic abuse is designed to make us feel. Hinako, a headstrong girl fighting against the injustices thrust upon her, grew up in an abusive society, paired with an abusive family. In her journal, she writes about her perceptions of the world and of her father, an alcoholic and abusive man, to which she states,
"He loses all control over his emotions in the blink of an eye. He yells at Mom, throws things around, and even hits us."
But yet, this abuse is hidden, normalized in society. She continues,
"Why can't he act like that in public? Why does everyone else only get to see his quiet, calm side?"
This is typical behavior for an abusive man, to deceive those around him into believing him a calm and loving husband and father. But systemic abuse runs deeper. It prevents men from ever showing softer sides, always showing strength and power, even when they turn abusive and unloving. However, had people been made aware of his abusive tendencies, well, nothing would change. The system enables Hinako's father to do whatever he pleases, because both Hinako and her mother are merely seen as property. The women are isolated, unable to find help in a system designed to keep them from receiving any. Hinako's mother, on the other hand, understands her role in society and doesn't argue with something she cannot fight against. This infuriates Hinako, urging her to write,
"My mother. If I had to choose one word to describe her, it would be pitiful. She's the one who bears the brunt of my father's violent moods and malicious abuse."
But Hinako's hatred is misplaced onto her mother, someone who does not have any power herself. And at the same time, Hinako's hatred is a projection of her own powerlessness. It's easy to find disdain for those in similar situations, because they remind you of how powerless you are in fighting a system that constantly abuses you. The strongest feeling that Hinako embodies is the fear of turning into her mother, a subservient wife to an abusive man, especially after her saving grace and sister, Junko, was previously shipped off to become a bride herself. Hinako writes,
Was she really so happy to be sending her daughter off to suffer the same fate as her? Did she raise her just to be beaten and abused by some man?
Based on the strained relationships within her family and the abandonment she felt as her sister married off into a new family, Hinako felt isolated, unable to fight against a system that had abused her family into a broken shell. Her friends, Sakuko, Rinko, and even Shu, all fail to help her combat the system, unable to prevent Hinako's fears from coming true, as she is forcibly entered into an arranged marriage in order to pay off her father's debts. This is the premise that Silent Hill F brings forth. A girl, hell-bent on fighting for her own independence and power to make her own decisions, has all of her power stripped away from her. When it comes to arranged marriages, especially in 1960s Japan, marriage is seen as a death sentence for the woman. She is no longer able to belong with her birth family, but quickly becomes the property of a man, and, in Silent Hill fashion, is gruesomely stripped of her strength, branded, and then swaps the mask of Hinako Shimizu for the mask of a subservient wife. A mask molded in her husband's image and lacking of all individuality. It's as Ishimiro Shizue, a Japanese feminist and one of the first women elected to the legislature of Japan after World War II, also known as the pioneer in the birth control movement, writes in her autobiography.
Consciously or unconsciously, my mother taught her daughter to crush her desires and ambitions, and trained her to be ready to submerge her individuality in her husband's personality and his family's united temper. Girls were to study, first of all, how to please their husband's parents with absolute obedience. Mother never thought it possible that I should become a good companion, discussing social problems or politics with my husband, or even reading books with him. Marriage with a Japanese girl meant losing individual freedom.
Hinako's arrangement to marry a man against her own wishes paints the entirety of Silent Hill F. Her own psychological torment begins to manifest itself within the town of Abisogaoka, in classic Silent Hill fashion. Almost immediately after the fog rolls in, Hinako is subjected to horrifying monsters that represent her own turmoil and perceptions about women and men in society. For example, one of the first monsters she meets is the kashimashi, meaning noisy or boisterous in English. It resembles a severely abused woman, covered in wounds throughout her body, presumably inflicted for being too loud. Hinako writes,
A monster that appears to be lumps of flesh stitched together. It approaches with an unsettling smile when it catches sight of me. It's covered all over with sickening wounds. I wonder if it wants to hurt me the same way it was hurt.
But the smile doesn't just indicate a violent tendency to hurt others, but a chance to express herself in the way that allows her to fight back against the abuses inflicted upon her. Other monsters, like the Irohihi, which loosely translates to pervert, can be seen attacking Hinako by licking her. She writes,
The greedily staring eyes, the greasy palms, the disgusting way it acts all chummy with me, all of it is completely repulsive. What's more, it never even bothers with guys. Typical.
Even the birthing monster, which is supposed to resemble a pregnant woman, looks as if all human qualities are stripped away, prioritizing being a machine to birth as many babies as possible. Hinako writes,
What a vile show of life. I'd rather die than turn into a monster like this.
Each one of these representations are the twisted view that society has on both women and men, all stemming from Hinako's own perceptions of the world and her psychological torments. In addition, she would begin to see each and every person in her life as a monster as well, with her father and mother transforming to battle her, and her friends Rinko and Sakuko. We understand that they are not monsters in and of themselves, but for Hinako, every individual became an obstacle in living a free life, since they all perpetuate an endless system of abuse, especially her sister, who Hinako idolized. Seeing her married off changed her perception, and now every interaction she has is with a corpse of her sister long gone. Now, Junko merely wishes to convert Hinako into being a subservient housewife, a wish Hinako struggles with as she wants to preserve both her childhood and the freedom that it comes with, tearing her into two distinct versions of Hinako, one who accepts her fate as a wife and one who relentlessly fights back. At this point in the video, there are hundreds of details that strengthen the idea that Hinako, and by extension, all of us, are being abused in a rigid social structure, women and men included. There are also tons of wonderful video essays about this game and its details that I urge you all to check out. These pictured on the screen being some of my favorites, and some from those who graciously lent their voices to this video. All links for them will be in the description. But now, I want to discuss more of the overarching theme present with the endings, and finally answer how Hinako's story can be a solution for systemic abuse. One detail in relation to the multiple endings of the game that I want to talk about are the red capsules. The first appearance of these capsules appear as Hinako leaves her home in anger, looking for someone to talk to. After, she stumbles upon Shu, her childhood best friend, who stood by her side as she began to combat social norms. He hands her the red capsules he had made himself, hoping it would be the solution to calm her down. In the game, you are able to take these as they restore part of your health and a part of your sanity. It's unclear what exactly the medicine that Shu gives her is comprised of. Many people relate it to the drugs in other Silent Hill games, but there's only one type of drug that I associate it with: sedatives, the class of drugs taken for its calming and sleep-inducing effect. They are central nervous system depressants and interact with brain activity, causing its deceleration or the slowdown of brain activity. When Hinako is feeling the frustration, anguish, and pain of being unable to fight against an abusive system, she does what many people do, whether consciously or not. She sedates herself. This numbs herself out to the pain, because that is the only solution for a pain that cannot be stopped. We always look for ways to numb the pain, because it feels better to live numbed out rather than constantly battling. But the issue isn't in the battling, it's why are we battling in the first place? As Fukuda Hideko writes in 1913,
complete liberation entails not just liberation of women, but the liberation of that which is human. What is necessary is not the freedom of women, but the freedom of humanness.
and if those freedoms were granted to us by this system that wants to abuse us, the use of numbing agents would no longer be the only solution. These battles that we continue to fight every day brings me to the numerous endings of the game, many of which I have issue with. Let's start off with the true ending, a beautiful and hopeful ending, Ebisogaoka in Silence. This ending occurs as Hinako doesn't take any red capsules and reconciles with herself, allowing both versions to have the opportunity to choose a life that they wanted. They understand that their family and friends were not monsters, but horribly abused individuals in the system that continue to perpetuate it. Kotoyuki, Hinako's arranged husband, allows her to freely choose whether to marry him for love or not, and not be a victim to this abusive system. I love this ending for the hope that it instills. It gives women the choice they have been robbed of for so long, and the power of forgiveness in yourself and the ones that had wronged you. But this ending also gives me a weird feeling. Seeing both Hinakos fully realize throws me for a loop, as it becomes too recognizable that this is merely a fictional ending. Many women do not have the choice for this type of ending in their life, and victims never have the opportunity to have a choice in the system that chooses for them. So, despite it being the true ending, I feel hollow after achieving it. It doesn't provide us an answer to anything, but merely gives us a fantasy inapplicable to our lives today. Similarly, the good ending, named The Fox Wets Its Tail, sees Hinako defeat her fox self and Kotoyuki, allowing her to run off freely with her childhood best friend, Shu. This ending feels very much so a rejection of growing up into this abusive system, allowing yourself to remain free, but always on the run, afraid of being absorbed back into the system of abuse you try to run so hard from. Well, this does not provide us an answer in how to escape an abusive system, but rather, it just shows us that we can run from it. To run from the system that's always a few steps behind you, and often we might run into another predicament reminiscent of our abusive pasts. Surely, there has to be a permanent escape, right? Now, the bad ending, named Fox's Wedding, I have a strange affinity for, especially in the realm of horror. In this ending, Hinako accepts her fate to become a bride, as the fox version of herself remains. She rejects Shu's help to save her from her forced destiny, to which he admits to using the red capsules in an attempt to drug her and keep her with him forever. What? At this point, you need to know that Shu isn't a romantic interest for Hinako, per se, but merely someone also holding on to the past and not wanting to conform to society's expectations. That doesn't excuse his horrifying behavior. He made Hinako a victim of abuse to offset his fears about being a victim himself. It's common for men to use women as an outlet for their frustrations, especially since they are granted more power than women have. And with more power comes the opportunity to exercise it in damaging ways. The final moments of the bad ending see Shu reconcile with Kotoyuki. They then agree to pass Hinako on, as if she were merely property, and agree that they know Hinako more than anyone else, and what's best for her, even more than herself. This horrifying ending wraps up with Hinako's old face crying out for help, forgotten and abandoned, replaced as a subservient bride. The system of abuse wasn't able to be broken, and instead, Hinako remained broken instead. I actually love this ending because it doesn't lighten the severity and symbolism that so many victims face in an abusive system. It doesn't opt in for a fantasy to escape abuse. Ultimately, it ends by showing that sometimes there was no escape, only the acceptance to be continuously abused. Horrifying, yes. Depressing, also yes, but also deeply impactful. But I don't want to leave you all with the idea that there is no escape, that you are alone in your struggles. I want to cover one last ending today, the first ending that everyone gets once they beat the game for the first time. And strangely, the one that led me to understand and escape for systemic abuse. Hopefully, not in the way that you think. The normal ending, named Coming Home to Roost, highlights Hinako fighting with her future to be a bride. It showcases that Hinako takes the fight literally, killing numerous people at her arranged wedding, then fleeing from police afterwards. This is by far the most literal ending for Silent Hill F. Everything we see in the game is a projection of Hinako's trauma in Silent Hill fashion. The game is symbolic and not meant to be treated at face value. It begs for analysis. But in this ending, she is not a teenager in school anymore. That's just how she's represented in Silent Hill. But this ending shows her older, in the present. It showcases a woman constantly abused by a system that's limiting her freedom and taking medication to cope with her reality, finally lashing out in the only way that she could, with violence. Now, I'm not condoning violence. In fact, it's heartbreaking that Hinako had to resort to violence to fight for her independence. It echoes the sentiments that hurt people hurt people. Each character was part of a structure that abused one another, and Hinako was at the bottom of the ladder, struggling to climb up. So she lashed out, fighting against everything and everyone. But we need to examine her violence, for violence of the oppressed is never the same as violence of the oppressor. Violence isn't an escape from abuse. It's a byproduct. It's the only way victims can feel a sense of power in their life in a system designed for them to have none. And this violence is anything but silent. It's horrifyingly loud. It pierces through the indifference of those who would perpetuate the system without their knowledge. It disrupts the status quo of those living their daily lives in an abusive system. The biggest thing it does, what it did for me, is that it made me feel empathetic to Hinako's struggles. A previously unknown Japanese girl from 1960s Japan, and the struggle she faced that I had never known anything about. It's in this moment, learning the horrors that she faced and the horrors that millions of people face every day, that I can finally see an escape to the system of abuse. That escape is never the temporary solution to run away. It's never the punishable offense of violence in a system that will silence any dissidents. It's the education of those unfamiliar with your struggles, building connection between us when the system seeks to isolate us, and an appeal to everyone's empathy. Now, empathy is not an inherent trait. You may feel that many people lack empathy, but empathy is merely a muscle that needs to be strengthened constantly, a muscle that needs a variety of diverse voices to help exercise it. Thanks to Silent Hill F, I have been privy to the mind of Hinako, her desires, her views on the world and the people around her, and of the system that abuses her. Thanks to Reflections on the Way to the Gallows, Rebel Women in Prewar Japan, I have been privy to numerous inspirational Japanese women who fought for a better future in the ways that they could. Each one of these stories has allowed me to understand a world that is not my own, and yet it is the same one that I share with them, even as they are long gone. In a way, their expressions and passions for social justice allowed me to feel a sense of connection to them, despite not having the same experiences as a man. The answer that they provide in how could anyone escape systemic abuse is simply in the education and action of so many of us to help provide a voice for those who are powerless to speak up for themselves, to provide safety for everyone, and stop abuse in any way that we can. It is not an easy path or a short one, but it's one always worth traveling. And this solution can be implemented over time, hopefully sooner rather than later, so that we can make changes to the system that abuses so many of us, that we take a step in the right direction against hate, fascism, and abuse. We cannot make change without hearing how it affects the most marginalized of groups. Even a Japanese girl, unable to make choices or speak for herself. With this in mind, I want to leave you all with one final idea, one that I love. What does the F in Silent Hill F stand for? Many people list that it can mean 5, as in the 5th in the Silent Hill series, or for flower, since the game was focused on the red spider lilies and the beauty in horror. But my favorite interpretation is that F stands for forte, which can be defined as one's strong point, since it's Italian for strong. But in musical notation, it tells a player to perform that musical note loudly, arguing that this instrument needs to be heard amongst the noise. And Hinako's story, as well as every story of a victim suffering at the hands of abuse, needs to be heard. I hope I urge you all to listen to more diverse stories, to really engross yourself in other cultures and find out exactly how the system abuses them and yourself in the numerous sneaky ways that it does. All it takes is for us to really empathize with one another to make positive changes in society. But I am just one man who had been graciously helped by so many influential people that lent their voices to this video. I hope you all take the time to watch their own videos about Silent Hill F, or other videos about the game and abuse in general. Education is the most important thing we can do to help us survive. And finally, I want to leave you all with one powerful last quote from Tomoe Yamashiro, an activist and novelist who traveled all over Japan to record the oral history of rural women, giving a voice to the voiceless. In this piece, she used her time in prison to write about a character based on an abused woman whose circumstances had caught her attention. Her name was Mitsuko.
I have no idea the springtime will come when we reach 50 or 60, but I am convinced that it will be a spring when even the weeds can be made into cakes, because we will be getting ready for spring no matter how many cold winters we have to endure, and because we have faith in each other.
Thank you all so much for watching.